All right. Well, I hope this may be not an answer completely to the problem that you've posed, but it's one way of bringing it in an intentional kind of way, at least for part of the lecture. So this fits into that last, I think, solution that you had on your slide, and also the question from over there about what do we do if you put an activity up, but they're still going for their phones? Well, what if the activity you put up had them reach for their phones and bring the phones in? So that's what I'm going to talk about here. And just a disclaimer right off the top, this is my first smartphone, and I've been using it since May. I'll just go now. But a late adopter, suspicious of the technology, and so that is part of what I'm talking about here, because despite that suspicion, despite that uncertainty about whether this is good and right, there's something that I wanted to do, and I thought that this was a vehicle to do it. So it's recognizing that our own impulses may be to keep this, increase the technology at a bit of a distance, but maybe that is not reflecting uses going on right now. So please turn on your mobile devices, sort of the opposite command from what we would expect for giving at the beginning of a class. I teach in Share in the Department of Religious Studies, but I come from a journalism background, and my work is sociology of media and sociology of religion. So I figured if there's anybody who's going to be the one to bring media technologies into the Department of Religious Studies, it probably ought to be me. And what I was hoping to do, I brought in a new module just for the first time this past academic year called Religion in the News, Conflict and Context. And it was about integrating understandings of religion with what was happening in contemporary news media. So it recalled to me work that I had done when I was a journalism student at Carleton University in Ottawa in Canada. And we had to do a news quiz. This was a summative assessment, in fact. This was actually, I think, 5% of our mark in first year was this weekly news quiz. And the purpose behind it was to build a habit of reading the news, because we were going to be studying journalism for the next 4 years, and then we might go on and work the profession, so you have to make that a habit. So being aware of what's going on, treating that as important right from the get-go is there. This class isn't that large. The students are religious studies students. They're not necessarily going to become journalists themselves, but I still wanted the habit to be brought in for them that would be useful as they go through the course. And so it was a formative assessment. Here you can see a tweet that was sent out at the beginning of the year from my old alma mater, and they're in a nice new whiz-bang learning facility there, and they've got the big screens up like this. That's not how we did it at the time. We had a sheet of paper and we would write our answers down and then hand them in. So that was my memory of the news quiz as a student, but seeing this as an example of how they are using technology now to administer this, it just made sense to me. So why did I want to do a news quiz? So I mentioned a little bit about the teaching objective side of it. Part of it is to engage the students, to give them the chance to respond rather than simply being talked to for the next 2 hours. To invite technology in, because as I said, although I'm skeptical of it, this is a technology that people are using, and I would be lying to say I didn't use technology in other ways. My laptop, I would tweet at conferences, that kind of thing. So I've already adopted media practices into what I do, so why would we deny students the use of that in this space where they are being students? And it was also to help them prepare for their assessments. They had 2 assessments in exam, but also a critical commentary where they would take a news story and write a short essay about how religion is represented in that. So that will giving them a weekly cycle of news stories that deal with religion may help. And in fact, I could say that some of the essays that they wrote were based on stories that had manifested during the news quiz. There are also institutional imperatives. The Board of Studies really wanted to diversify assessments. They were worried they were too much on essays, and maybe the essay and exam, which is the default this or that, emphasis on the essay. So we were being asked, could we think about different ways of doing assessments? So I said, yes. I'll do a news quiz. It'll be a formative assessment. It'll be different. It'll be exciting. And probation, of course, I'm an early career researcher, and so going through academic practice, Emma James right here is helping us through that process, encouraging us to think creatively about pedagogical techniques. I thought, well, I've got a new module I'm bringing out. Let's do it. So how did I go about it? I contacted our own college staff, Dowie Perry, and I said, here's what I want to do. How can I make this work? And he gave me 4 options. Turning point, which are the clickers, which you might all recall, very good for short or for multiple choice or true or false, but I wanted the short answer elements to it as well. But that was one possibility. Poll Everywhere, which is a polling software, and I'll talk more about that over time. Twitter was one possibility, doing the quizzes via Twitter with a dedicated hashtag. One of the advantages you saw for this was that it could encourage responsible professional use of social media among the students, and I thought, maybe not. That has risks involved too, and I thought maybe a bit too public for taking risks as well if students are uncertain about taking part in a new field for them. These aren't journalism students. This could be a bit too public. And finally, Google Forms, which is a free software through Google that does very similar things to Poll Everywhere. These were the 2 that I seized on that looked like they might satisfy what I was trying to do. And I trialed both of them, tried the patience of my wife and friends, even got MA students to do some samples of this and see how does it work, what's going to do. And in the end, what I decided was that Poll Everywhere was the closest to what I wanted. Free for 40 users. Now I had 52 on the module, so I had to double students up to make that work. That was all right for me because one of my hesitations was, well, what about students like me who don't have these things? I don't have a laptop, there's cost, there's accessibility issues, so I didn't want to make participation in this mandatory that you had to have the technology. But I thought by doubling up, if they didn't have a tech, they could sit next to someone who did, and they could still take part in the quiz, and that would also take care of the cap. It had control to a certain extent over the results display. You'll see some screenshots of what the quiz looked like, and I liked the way that was appearing. It did most of what I wanted to do. Not all of it, and I'll talk at the end about the format I wanted was to have a question with a time slot. They had a time period where they could answer, and the question closes. The answers then materialize on the board. What I wanted after that was to have some way of presenting an image of a news story that this quiz question was related to, so they could then connect that with something that was actually appearing on a Guardian website or BBC or something like that. So, setting up the quiz then, I put this in chalk on the blackboard behind me, and they would punch in this web link. Looks a little bit funny, but it's not too tricky, and students could just type it into their phones, and then actually if they had it, it was a stable link for every quiz that I ran, so week on week they would use this link, and off we would go. So this is a sample of the answers to a question. It was from the first, I don't know if this is the first one we did, and you can see, interesting that most students got the wrong answer to this question. This was a multiple choice one, and the right answer was Stockwell Green Mosque, which is facing investigations from Britain's Charity Commission. But you set it up in a way and they can take part. We'll redeem them because the short answer question that followed that, a lot of them did get the correct answer. You can see a range of answers appearing on the screen, a variety of answers, some of them incorrect, but some correct. Ahmadiyya, killing Ahmadi for not subscribing to mainstream Islam. That gets a bit more specific, so demonstrating some knowledge of the story that's involved. Now, I should answer at this point that I imposed pub quiz rules. So this is very tricky to do, but you've got your mobile device in your hand, or your laptop in front of you. Don't Google. Don't just Google the answer. You can say these things. They've got the device in front of them. They will or they won't, depending. But at least you can encourage them to take it in better spirit. This maybe helps them out a little bit more. Another example where most of them got the right answer, that the women taking the streets in tens of thousands to counter legislation against abortion was in the country of Poland. And the next highest answer was a very good answer, although not the correct one for that week. But it showed a bit more knowledge, and then an ability to integrate that with what does this have to do with religion, and they gave some answers about the Catholic presence in Poland. So there's some knowledge demonstrated. sometimes none of them got the answer right. I didn't think this one was going to be that tricky. But what was interesting, Bangladesh being the correct answer, was that of all the answers that were given, they were all different. So they had some geographical knowledge at least. It's encouraging. Sometimes the students were being very clever with me, which you can imagine happens in a short answer. This is one of the risks that a software like this can bring on. But the first question had been, who is the Gaucho priest? And that was mentioning this priest, Jose Gabriel del Rosario Brotero, and he was being canonized by the Pope. So that was the first question, but there was some distraction during that question, and I ended up lingering long on it so that I got a huge amount of correct answers for that question, which surprised me. Then I realized that the timer hadn't shut the question down, so they could all and Google very effectively to get the right answer. So they got it. So that the A question then was, what does he share with the man who canonized him? Where they could talk about the Argentinian heritage of the current pope, as well as this Gaucho priest. But we get a whole range of answers. Some of them just witty and amusing. Some of them a little bit on the edge of, did they both do tequila like it was going out of fashion? I was a big fan of Bag of Minstrels. I thought that was pretty good. And then this one answer, say Pope Francis is canonized a Gaucho priest, that's the first two sentences of the bbc.co.uk story about the Gaucho priest. They were saying, we Googled this one. But I could be clever too. This one, there's no possible way that I could ever expect the students to know this. It was published in the National Post, which is a Canadian national newspaper, and it does have an online expression. There's no reason for students at Cardiff University to have been following the National Post or to know about the story. So there's a playful element to it as well. But surprisingly, one student got almost the right answer with English mystic. The correct answer is Brother 12, who was the adopted name of an English mystic who created a community on De Courcy Island. But this was stuff that I learned right at my school because I grew up in Nanaimo, right across from De Courcy Island. So there are opportunities to push them a little bit too. Okay. So this is an example from Poll Everywhere's quiz page. The students wouldn't see this, but I can see this, and it's a bit small. I apologize for that. But you can get a sense about different kinds of answers. These ones are multiple choice versus the little speech bubble, which is a short answer question. And you can see that the highest responses on the right-hand side are for the multiple choice. So perhaps no surprises, although I wanted students to be doing short answer, multiple choice got far more participation on a question-by-question basis. The biggest question actually was 23 responses for what was a CD review. Maybe you know the answer to this one. The first sound you hear is from a choir from the Montreal synagogue in which Blank's family worshipped, and the last is Blank apparently addressing Jesus with a certain, don't you see the rest, any guesses on what the right answer to that question is? Leonard Cohen. But Kings of Leon got the big response there. Also released a CD that same week, so I was being clever there too. The first week, from 3rd October, there was a really high take-up, average of 20.1 responses. The highest was 29, well done students. The lowest was just 9, and that was for the first question, so maybe some of them are still just, what am I doing? Oh, I gotta figure this whole thing out. So there was enthusiasm off the start. The last quiz was 28th of November, much lower take-up, average of 6.5 responses. The highest was 13, the lowest was 0. Very disappointing. This is the question that didn't get any answers at all, despite the fact that that week we've been talking about, the previous week we talked about manifestations of religious violence, covering religious violence. The last example we talked about was the Rwandan genocide, and yet here they couldn't imagine what might have happened on this day 22 years after this event. In fact, it was an apology from the Catholic Church for its role in the activity of the genocide there. So I was a little disappointed with that one. Now maybe that is about the end of year time coming, and maybe their heads are focused on exam preparation or essay preparation or what. There is also a general tailing off of enthusiasm. I think as well though, because it's a formative assessment, it's not for marks, the novelty had worn off by the end of the lecture. They knew what was going on, and maybe they said, we don't need to, this is the time we can tune out. We'll pull our phones out and look really dutiful, but we're just checking email or posting things on Twitter. I don't know. But I did give them the opportunity to tell me. I did halfway through throw some quiz questions up to give them their opportunity to tell me how they liked it. And as you can see, only positive to the a median point, but generally students really liked it. If they were given a choice of adjectives to describe it, they picked easy and fun. No one picked hard or annoying, so that was nice. Opportunity to fill in some more blanks. This was related to my concern about accessibility of the technology, but everyone told me don't be dumb. Everyone's got a mobile phone anyway, or a laptop. We know what's going on. Also, education and fun was coming up with it. Adds a certain spice to not found in the lectures, so they were appreciating the difference of being able to use this technology in the class for class purposes. 76% agreed that it fit well with the rest of the module. I'm surprised that it's actually as low as that, but that's all right, because it seems like religion in the news, there's a quiz about news stories about religion. I would see a pretty natural fit. This one gave me more concern. I see the value of news quizzes in preparing me for the assessed work on the module, because I was trying to make clear to them that you're showing examples of how news agencies cover stories about religion. And that should be helpful for you in preparing your material, especially seeing stories that you might want to write your critical commentary on. So the fact that a third of them didn't see that link just means for me that I have a bit more work to do. I then gave them opportunity for just further comments, and there were some more nice positive things that came up from this, as well as some general anxiety about not the news quiz at all, but an opportunity to say, we've got an exam coming up, but we don't know what to do. Tell us how to prepare. As well as maybe a worry that there was too much theory going on, and too much media when they're not media students. I got to hear all that. However, it was the first year the module was being run. The students, as you may understand, are a little bit apprehensive about their exams and their marks. I'm trying to tell them, you're going to be fine. And also, I have no past exam to show you, because there has been no exam on this module before. But nonetheless, that was kind of the flavor of a lot of the feedback I got here. Can you talk about the exam in next week class, please? But also, quizzes are so fun. Keep them coming. So that was good. And at the end of the module evaluations, the news quiz did surface then. When asked, what did you particularly like about the module, 5 of them mentioned the quiz outright, which I was pretty good. And these words like fun, engaging, exciting. If there was any critical element to it, it was just this, which I think you might have seen in the halfway through evaluation as well. Put it in the seminar rather than the lecture. This had 2 hours of lecture and then 1 hour seminar each week, and they said, do the quiz in the seminar so we can keep the lecture for the learning and learn more exciting stuff about media theory and religion. So I thought, well, fair enough. But I'm glad that they returned to it in a spontaneous way. So think about what I would do differently. Thank you. I would put it in the seminar, not the lecture. It'll be a smaller group, so regardless of the polar door cap, all can participate. I might think about a different software. There's a Welsh company I've learned of and worked with actually back in April called Dupol, and they do a very good if I can. I really want to get that question, answers, then image, and see if there's a way to make that happen. Supporting the software and subscribing to it as a university may make that possible. And just keep explaining the purpose, keep telling them why it is we're doing this, and integrate that into what is happening. So it will happen again next year, and we'll see if things improve. The Alton Bar.